by being at the meeting, you consent to the meeting being recorded. The first thing on the agenda is apologies for absence. As far as I can see, we don't have any apologies for absence. So there's no one missing, so we'll move on. Any declarations of interest on any item on the agenda, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary? Okay, thank you very much. I see no members of the public, so we will move on to the next item, no public open session. Minutes of the previous meeting. Any issues with the previous minutes, please? Any comments, issues, etc.? Are you happy for me to sign them off? We'll do a virtual sign off. In which case, I'm not looking to rattle through the agenda, but Sarah, we will jump straight on to schools for the future then. I think Sarah's going to give it an update.
Could I just matters arising from the minutes? There was. That's all right. I don't think it was on the agenda as matters arising. So there was a point in there that asked for an update on the Lilac Grove Chambers Way junction, and I think Paul Middleton was going to go back and try and find out what the plans were for that. I can't remember what page it was of the minutes, but it was in there.
Have you got anything on that, Paul, or is that something you can come back to?
It's something we'll come back to. Unfortunately, with Paul Salmon being on leave out of the office, I haven't actually had a chance to catch up with him on that.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, thank you. So I'm obviously well aware that you haven't got a lot of detail for us in terms of specifics, which is quite right. But if you, as you say, you're going to talk through the overview of where we're at with schools of the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And can you hear me okay? I'm just going to assume, unless I hear differently, you can hear me. I'm really pleased to be here today. And if it's okay with you, Chair, I'd like to share a few slides. If I'll give me a minute, and I'll just get up the slides up on the screen. What I was hoping to do today is just share with the committee a broad update about where we are with the whole programme, and just say a little bit about where we are in terms of the process around Biggleswade. I'm conscious that I may be speaking to an audience, some of whom are extremely knowledgeable about the programme and some of whom may be less so. So forgive me if I talk to you and you actually know a lot of the detail that I present, but I thought it might be helpful just to give the overview. And really happy to take any questions, and apologies for those members of the committee who are really steeped in this and very familiar with it. So I'm just going to share my screen, just bear with me. Oh, well, I seem to be having a problem with sharing my screen. Why is that? Ah, because I'm in the wrong. Oh, can I share my screen? Yes, I can. Can you see that?
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I'm used to lots of messages.
Oh, yes. I'm used to sharing in Teams. Apologies. I'm just slightly taken aback by that. Let me just see if I can get rid of that. Right. Okay. Okay. So hopefully you can see my screen. So just to give you a bit of an overview, really of what the programme is about, and just to remind us of what some of those sort of first principles are. Although I'm new to Central Bedfordshire and I'm new to the area, and also to the council, I am conscious that there's been a huge amount of work done that I'm sure the committee's been very closely involved with in shaping a future vision for Central Bedfordshire, and looking at our long-term 30-year plan and aspiration for Central Bedfordshire. And a part of that is having a real focus around making sure that we have the right skills for the future and the right education system that will both, of course, create the right number of school places that we need for the town, but also that we have a workforce for the future, and that our education system will support that ambition. So you will be aware that the current schools landscape in Central Bedfordshire, as part of that ambition and that drive towards transformation of our education system, it is very mixed, and we have a very mixed economy, both of a three-tier system, a two-tier system. So we have low schools, middle schools and upper schools representing our three-tier system of education. And through each of those schools, children are making transitions at each of those points from lows into middles into uppers. But we also have many parts of Central Bedfordshire that are in a two-tier system, primary and secondary, And we do actually have a course in Biggleswade, one lower stroke middle combined school and extended secondary school. So that this slide really just illustrates, I think, the range of the educational provision that we have at the moment and the range of the diversity of the economy. So what we really are, part of the focus of the Schools of the Future programme is to make sure that we are looking at creating a coordinated approach to change so that we have a simplified and unified system of education. And you can see that this slide here just shows you, and this is not a comment on the standard or excellence of our middle schools, but actually increasingly we have a very, very much smaller number of middle schools across the country. With this slide just shows you this number. We have 107 nationally, and 15 of those are in central Bedfordshire. So we need to make sure, as part of that future vision for education, we're going to be able to continue to attract the best quality teaching and teachers into the system that we can. So the purpose of the programme is to, as I say, create a coordinated plan to meet both our growth requirements, but fundamentally to make sure that we have the right schools in the right places delivering the best education. So as ever, for all our educational provision, it's about improving our educational outcomes at all our key stages. It's an opportunity for us to collectively shape the future of our educational landscape together, and the together and collaboration is a really important part of the way that we're approaching this. It's an opportunity for us to think, although the programme is focused on the 5 to 16, the primary to secondary transition, about what happens for our early years provision, our post-16, and also how we're meeting the needs of our children who might have special educational needs and disabilities. So whilst the focus is to move us towards a primary secondary model, actually it's also an opportunity for us to look across the system at the total educational journey for all our children. And of course, value for money and ensuring the viability of our schools is a really important principle. So just very simply, I think I'll probably talk this through really. There are two aspects to the whole programme. One is about that transition from us being a 3-tier system to a 2-tier system of education. And then secondly, of course, making sure that as we're doing that work, and it's closely aligned to the expansion of our schools where we need to meet future demand. This slide is a very busy slide. I'm not going to try and even attempt to talk to it, but I think it illustrates the complexity of the work and the complexity of the programme in achieving this change. So here, and hopefully you can see my cursor on the left-hand side, these are the different school clusters. So when we are working with our schools, we work in different clusters, and you can see here, of course, that Biggleswade is one of our clusters. And for each of these, we have a complex set of governance arrangements and partnership negotiations and discussions that we need to have, from maintained schools to working with our academy trusts, and those may be single academy trusts or they may be part of a multi-academy chain, working with the diocese and others. So it's just working with the schools is an incredibly complex set of conversations and communications and collaboration. We have other external bodies who we need to continually pay attention to and work with and alongside, from, I've mentioned the diocese, the Department for Education, our trade unions, the Regional School Commissioner, Ofsted, etc. And here, I think it highlights, this bottom section here just highlights the various different work streams that are all need to feed into a final set of proposals or plans that we might make at any one cluster, for any one cluster. So I've mentioned the types of educational provision, and these are here, but in each of the cluster discussions that we're having, we are paying attention and must pay attention to a whole raft of different factors that are very connected to a move to a 2-tier system. So that will be from our school admissions, school organisation, transport, school improvement, making sure that we're engaged with our highways team, our planning colleagues, and of course through to the design and build elements of any changes that are required in schools. And that's notwithstanding some of the kind of the nuts and bolts of how the finance works, our HR systems, communications and legal services. And of course, all of this is about making sure that we are delivering best outcomes for children and young people and engaging with them and parents, and also, of course, members. So I've talked a bit about collaboration, and there are some really important principles for us about the way that we're working. Because the local authority, if we were doing this work 20 years ago, it would have been a very different approach. Of course, we would have been collaborating, but where schools were much more part of the local authority, clearly there was a more straightforward way of engaging with those schools. Of course, now we have a much more diverse economy in terms of schools. So getting that collaboration and making sure that we're doing it together is a really important principle and way of working. It's a really important part of why, when we are developing proposals, it may take us time to get there, because getting as much coherence across the partnership to those proposals as possible is really, really critical. So we've just got here some of the guiding principles that we're using in the way that we're approaching that work. We have to stay focused on what is the best interests of children and education. That's our first, foremost, and sort of last priority. I talked about the collaboration across the cluster, making sure that we're joined up and really thinking systemically about whatever we do and what impact that may or may not have on other parts of the system. And I've also talked about achieving best value, which is a really important public service principle, clearly, that we're all very, very familiar with. And lastly, to be coherent and transparent about the way that we're approaching it and approaching the way that we are working. So because of the size of the programme and the ambition of the programme, we need to take a cluster by cluster approach. We couldn't do all of this at once. It would be impossible. So you'll see here some broad timelines that we're working to. This is a long-term programme. It's a long-term change and transformation programme. And this just highlights, I think, where we have our current focus in terms of those early clusters or early developments that are well underway, and where we have some firm timelines that we're working to for delivery in Shefton Stockfold and in Leighton Linslade in the Fulbrook Pyramid. And then here you can see where we have clusters that we're actively engaging with at the moment, where we're still finalising and working on some of the detail of the proposal, which I'll just say a little bit more about in a moment. So where we are at the moment, I'm conscious that you as a committee are aware that we have had, get rid of that, that we have had a plan to come forwards with proposals over the last few months for Biggleswade, but there have been a number of interdependencies that we are seeking to try and manage and getting to a final set of proposals. So I've just mentioned them here. I've talked about just here about the Housing Infrastructure Fund, the Ivor Valley Special School, and the need for us to continue to work really closely with schools to develop proposals. So we don't expect what we consult on to be 100% right, and we're pretty confident that what we consult on will no doubt change through the process of consultation. But we do need to make sure that it's as we've explored and understood all the various complexities of the proposal before we consult. And of course, as you would entirely expect, our schools who have been so impacted by the pandemic, we've had to make sure that we can work with them at a pace that's going to work for them, bearing in mind everything else that they're dealing with at the moment. So where we are at the moment is that we have put, we've got an indicative date to launch a consultation for Biggleswade in April this year, at which point we will have a more detailed set of proposals to come back to you, and I'll be able to come back to you as a committee and go through those in more detail later in the year. And when we launch the consultation, I suppose the last thing I want to say on this is that we have a 12-week process. It's quite a long, it's longer than a normal consultation process, because we recognise that there is a lot of interest in this work and a lot of views that we want to gather. And it is a genuine consultation that lasts for 12 weeks. And as I just mentioned a moment ago, we have found in the consultations that we've done so far that often the final set of proposals that comes out of that process has undoubtedly shifted a bit, because there has been new information that's come to light, or we've had further discussions that has shifted or adapted some of our thinking. So it's important to stress that whilst we want to get that proposal as right as we can, and we need to make sure that plan is got the support of the schools, and the schools feel able to talk positively to their parents about it. During that consultation process, there very often is further things that come to light that we haven't previously considered, or that change the way that we're thinking about things. So I think that might be my last slide. So just to mention, we do have a website, Schools of the Future website, and a sort of generic email address. I'm really happy to take sort of obviously direct communication myself. We are in the process of updating the Schools of the Future website at the moment, because we're not convinced it's not been quite where it needs to be. So I'm really happy to take any feedback about that if you look at it and think it needs some further tweaks. So I think I'll stop sharing unless members would like to see me to go back. Shall I stop sharing?
That's fine. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing, then I can see you all.
Okay. Members, do we have questions for Sarah? Hayley?
Thank you, Mark. I'm also struggling to find all the buttons on here. I've been on Zoom all morning, I don't know why. So a couple of Sandy's much earlier than Biggleswade, and a lot of our residents do send their children to school in Sandy. Do you see the fact that they're running on very different timelines as a problem, or like to become a problem for our residents, or do you see that, you know, children might get sucked over to Sandy and come back to Biggleswade, or how do you think that's going to work? And then the other question is obviously around Dunton and Restingworth lower schools at the moment, because obviously there is this idea that the head teachers and the governors, for example, are very clear that they think they're going to be closed, I think, going forward, and all amalgamated, even though they're both outstanding schools. Do we have any more information on that?
So on the Sandy point, we, in a way, Sandy, because it changed earlier, it changed, I think, in 2018. If you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it became a secondary school in 2018, and when the plans to change in a place aren't coordinated, sometimes it can have ripple effects across on neighbouring or schools and neighbouring parts of the district, and we have seen some of that in Biggleswade and some of the schools. So what we're doing when we're thinking about the whole of the Biggleswade cluster is we always pay attention to what's happening in the neighbouring schools. So when we develop our final set proposals, it will be taking account of those schools, if you like, that aren't strictly within the cluster, but that may be sitting just on the outside. Because as you say, you know, children and families don't live within neat tidy clusters and towns that we might create, because they live in communities and might look in both directions. So I think just to say, we always take account, and we will be taking account of whatever's happening in Sandy in the thinking. And in terms of individual schools, I mean, that is all part of the current conversations that we're having at the moment to pull together a final set of proposals. And we're talking to all the lower schools, the middle schools and the upper schools about what a final plan might look like. Now, when I come back, hopefully when I come back to the committee with what that proposal looks like it'll hopefully be spring, early summer, when we track forwards, we'll be able to have more of a conversation about what that proposal looks like for Dunton. I don't have any information to share at the moment, Councillor Whitaker, today.
Thank you. Really helpful, thank you.
I guess it's just as a follow-up on that, we've also got the link between Samuel Whitbread as well and sort of the Stockpile cluster. So it's just I'm sure it is being considered, but bear that in mind as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Sarah? Hadley.
Sarah, I just wanted to say that you seem to be getting a grip of this. I'm no longer involved with Stratton Upper School, but I have chaired meetings of the cluster heads and chairman of governors as long ago as 2.5 years ago about this. And I genuinely want to see some progress. And I appreciate the way that you have to work cooperatively because of the academy situation. But from what I've seen, it will be very difficult for you to actually get something that everybody can come together on. And at some point, a decision is going to have to be made in the best interests of children, because I've seen very closely how it's difficult to find middle school teachers now of the right abilities. And I've seen the problems of transferring at age 13. So, you know, all power to your elbow. And I look forward to hearing it in April, where you've come to on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. And I think that's our goal, to get to a point where we have that agreement. And look, I do appreciate, I'm aware that you've had a long association with Stratton Upper. So any wisdom you can pass on, I would very happily receive that.
I think we all echo Councillor Russell's thoughts around the complexity. I think you've alluded to it. So, as you say, it's going to be a challenge over the next few months, isn't it? And in the coming years. So, any other members got questions or comments? I see no hands. Sarah, you've done a good job and made it very straightforward for us. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you hopefully in a few months' time.
Thank you
very much. Bye-bye.
Bye now. So the next item on the agenda then is place approach, an all update from Ingrid Hooley. Ingrid, welcome.
Hello everybody. So I am now your head of place delivery. I think most of you have worked with me on the HIF programme so far. And now I'm kind of taking that forward, not in a dissimilar way, but having a more strategic view. So a few things that I was going to pick up on this that I know you raised in your last meeting and moving forward. And so the main message really is from a place delivery perspective, that one of the things that we'd like to do for you is to try and make it a bit simpler to communicate with Central Bedfordshire in terms of the service area that I sit within, including place and planning and business investment, employment and skills, as well as highways and waste and community safety and a whole host of things. So the idea is that we're going to try and make that a bit simpler for you to communicate with us, and that me and my team will be sitting at the forefront of that to try and help coordinate and raise issues for you and coordinate from a whole place shaping perspective on the different issues, not so much on the day-to-day services, but more in terms of kind of growth and place shaping, and then kind of overall providing a better service to residents. So in the short term, I mean, I'm only picking this up kind of now and officially only start on Monday, but in the short term, so very much looking at trying for something feasible and tangible to get to grips with the Biggleswade. So thinking about sort of what are the key things that we can deliver within the next year to 2 years really. And around that, in some of the discussions that I've had and been involved in, I'm thinking Market Square, Hitchin Street, connectivity to the river would be key things that we can look at in the short term. And then in the longer term, obviously, a whole host of things on place shaping for Biggleswade, including the investment in the HIF, the Garden Communities programme, a whole host of issues that I hope to work with you all on in developing kind of a clear vision and a clear delivery programme. That's what I want to aim for, so that we have a timeline in our heads of what we want for Biggleswade, where we see things happening, where we might have funding gaps, where there might be funding opportunities coming, what we can deliver, what we'd like to deliver, and what long-term visions might be. That just in a very brief, that's where I am at the moment on place shaping. Shall I pause there if anyone wants to say anything on that bit?
Thank you. So Steve, I think you're first.
Yeah, so we had a very useful, I thought, ward member briefing on, was it Monday? Time flies in lockdown, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And some of the key issues we started to pick out was that river connectivity stuff. And I mentioned that Councillor Russell's made some inroads there and she's got some good relationships. So in terms of that, we discussed perhaps looking at what St Neots do with their river offer. And I mentioned that I do know the leader of Hunts District Council, so we could perhaps arrange for a visit in due course. And it was quite a productive discussion, but aside from that, we discussed what we might want to do in terms of town centre regeneration. So I guess it might be a good idea at this stage to hear what some of the thoughts of our colleagues are on that, because I know Councillor Foster wasn't able to attend and Councillor Bond was in the fire of the rail access meeting, weren't you, Ian? So you weren't able to attend. So it'd be good to hear what other members think priorities might be.
Okay. Before we go on to that, Steve, I'm happy, Hazel, if you want to jump in and make some comments, and then we'll go further. Go on, Hazel.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'm just wondering, looking at the things you've talked about, the Market Square, will you be working with Sam Caldbeck because he seems to have been taking the lead in the regeneration, or are you working on this independently? Have we got two for the price of one, or is Sam actually going to be doing something else?
You got buy one get one free, Hazel. So
right.
Sam, yeah. So Sam will be reporting into me. So he's part of my team.
Right.
So at the moment, I want to revisit what everybody's doing in the team that I've inherited, refresh their focus of their approaches, and agree with Sam really who does what for Biggleswade.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, but it will be coordinated, Hazel, I promise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael, I think next.
Yeah, well, I think what I would like to say, in terms of priorities, it's been there for a long time, but the Market Square and Hitchin Street are desperately in need of refurbishment and an overall facelift, aren't they? They've got very scruffy. And obviously the development of Hitchin Street some years ago was badly done, and now all the paving slabs are all cracked and broken, and it looks a real mess. And the Market Square itself is old. It's been like that. The last time it must be 30 years since it was sort of refurbished last time, wasn't it? It was early 90s, I believe, or was it mid 90s? So that's 25 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Paul Middleton might know about that.
That's all I would say. I should say also, Ingrid, I'm very glad to see that you're taking charge of this and that we've got
no pressure
running it now. Right. So thank you in anticipation.
I hope you all know that I've got the passion and commitment to Biggleswade and really want to work with you all closely to get the most out of everything that we can get for our residents. So Michael, I'm conscious very much. It was very much Steve and Hayley feeding information to me, plus the meetings I've been to on the neighbourhood plan. But and then thinking about COVID as well. COVID and the impact on high streets and how people move and circulate. So to me, the big thing for us to look at in this next year is Market Square. The future for that, for Hitchin Street, connectivity to that river, what can we make more of? How can we make it a destination? How can we make it somewhere where people want to go when they can go somewhere again, So, and I think for all of us, that's going to be the win, isn't it? For all of us in our respective roles, plus all of the residents of Biggleswade. That's what I'm thinking.
So Madeline.
Yes, thank you.
Ingrid, we've had lots of conversations over various things in the past, and I appreciate that you've had your meeting with ward councillors, but I think very much we need to get you involved with our town centre management councillors, particularly the chairman and vice chairman, and we need to make sure that everything that the town council has been doing and looking at over the last as much as 5 years actually coming into play with this. So it's a big strategic exercise right up here, trying to pull everything together, and then obviously work within the funding we've got. We know that we've got 800,000 of Section 106. That's not going to be nearly enough to sort out the Market Square in the way that we want to. And you know that we have some key issues with what Central Beds want to do with Century House, what might happen with the whole Aldi site, because we talk about possibilities of surgeries moving and all the sort of, there's a whole thing. And I think, I'm looking forward to meetings with you and with colleague town councillors as well as the ward councillors to really try and pull all this together and get that vision in place, because when Bill Grimsey visited us, he was very, very clear, get that vision in place and then go after the funding. And there are
absolutely
There are bound to be pots of money coming forward, and you are the expert at prizing those bits of money out of government. So no pressure, Ingrid, no.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's exciting. I'm so excited about having got this post and being able to work with you all in this way.
Excellent. Mike.
Oh, so I could see your lips moving, but I couldn't hear you there for some reason, Councillor Foster. Yeah, just really to echo the earlier comments. Certainly, the block work in the town square has obviously been damaged by roots of the lovely trees over the years, and is actually still quite uneven in places, despite blocks being removed and replaced with very unattractive tarmac. So, like others have said, I'd very much like to see that being prioritised. And I think there are some unique challenges around the shared responsibility of the town square, because obviously we do need to work very closely together. I think we've had some good successes recently, and delighted to see this week that the bench refurbishment project has finally started, which is an area where we have been able to work closely. So thank you for coming, and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Steve, you wanted to contribute now? Okay, Hayley.
Just to come in and say, I echo the thoughts. I know Ingrid knows my thoughts because we had a good meeting earlier this week. But in terms of the Market Square, I think we really do have to prioritise that and Hitchin Street. In terms of the trees, just so that town councillors are aware, those trees are actually entirely, although beautiful, are entirely inappropriate for that location. And that's why the tarmac keeps coming up, or the paving slabs keep coming up. So, and the reason it's taking so long, apparently, to come up with a grand plan as well as the funding is because ideally the tree officer would like to move those trees, because they're still relatively young. They're about 20 years old, as Councillor North alluded to. They're still relatively young trees. Ideally, we'll be able to move them to another location, not just chop them down. But obviously, that adds to the costs and adds to the timescales as well. So they're currently working through the various options of what might be possible on the town square, and I'm pushing very hard for that. But it would involve replacing those trees for something that's more appropriate for that site.
Madeline.
I agree with Hayley that the trees have to be moved. They have caused a lot of problems, and we've known for some time that part of the problem was that they weren't planted properly. They weren't planted deep enough in the first place. But you see, we're getting down into the detail, and it worries me about thinking about moving trees and doing stuff before we know actually what we want to do with the market stuff. So I'm just flagging that up, that I don't disagree with what's been said, but we must have that overall plan.
I think, Madeline, what you've alluded to around what the aspirations are of Central Beds in terms of the assets in the square, and how those assets are utilised, and how that affects other areas of the town. That obviously impacts on the thought process. Yeah, and when we've you obviously got the fact that we've got the transport interchange, and how that links into the town centre, and the impact of that, and how everything all links together. And as you're aware, it's that bit I think is going to be the biggest challenge, is making things join up, as with everything, and making it something that we all support, I guess, or as much as possible we all support. And we're aware of the issues around the transport interchange, and we won't go there on this if you don't mind, but I've raised it. But essentially, it's trying to tie everything together and to achieve something that works for the best of Biggleswade, not just from a financial point of view or for a planning point of view or meeting a number. If we're going to do it, let's do it properly. And if it takes a little bit longer, that's fine, but let's do it right, rather than just because we've got to hit a date. I've got no other thoughts on it. Ian, have you got anything you wanted to add? Members,
a couple of updates to share as well on Stratton Industrial Park, Garden Communities, and Heath, of course. Is that okay? Do you want me to
please do
carry on?
Yeah, we'll stretch it to fit into your place approach, Ingrid. It's absolutely
yeah. So in terms of the HIF programme, so all of that is on current target at the moment to the milestones that we have. Oh, I'm so sorry. Totally thought that was on silent. All on target at the moment against the milestones that we have with Homes England. So we've just submitted our quarterly monitoring report and our latest claim. So at the moment we've claimed 1.3 million from the programme so far out of our and we're on target against the Supergood project. So the biggest project, obviously, that there is, the most important one that is going to make everything else happen. We're on target with that, and our milestones we've already met is the agreement that we've got in place now with National Grid as well as with UK Power Networks. So all that's all legal and signed and sealed. Next key milestone for that particular project will be the going to planning at the tail end of this year. But before that, we hope to be able to do some, well, we will be doing some consultation. What we hope to be able to do is some actual physical consultation. So on that, we've been working with our comms team and design team and setting up images, really like storyboards around the whole of the HIF programme together, but trying to explain to people what it all means, how it all fits together, and what we're going to be coming to them to actually consult on in terms of the different planning processes around the different projects. So we'll have that set of boards available as a presentation, but also there'll be those pull-up boards as well. And my hope is that sometime in the future we'll be able to have those in the town hall and then move them around to the schools, to the library, that kind of thing. But before we get to that point, the key thing will be to come to you guys with a draft of what that's looking like. And we're getting quite close to that. I just haven't been able to give it as much attention as I wanted to this last week or so. But we'll come to you with drafts of where we are on that, so you can make sure you're happy with anything or ask for things to be added to that kind of communications approach for the whole programme. The housing delivery part of the programme is on target because, of course, the main thing is it's money in and houses out as far as Homes England are concerned. And despite the position that we're in and the economic environment, Biggleswade has continued as ever to deliver at a higher pace than anywhere else. And we were only due to deliver 10 homes in the last quarter, and we've actually delivered 30. So all of that's on target. So currently, currently that one's on target. There've been some delays around the Lindsell's Bridge project because surveys need to take place, and there were some delays there with Network Rail and their contractors. And then I'm thinking at the moment as well, and I just flagged that with them this week, that they'll need to check on land conditions because I know we've had so much heavy rain. I'm dubious about how fit the land is for surveys at the moment as well in the areas that they're looking at. So we're conscious that there'll probably be delays on that, but the next two targets for those are in February and March, so there might be some slight negotiation there, but again, nothing to worry about in terms of overall programme timing. Interchange, I hope you're all aware of, and don't think there's much to discuss on that right now. And so that's really all I wanted to say about the HIF programme. And Sarah, you've just heard from, so they're working towards an April consultation there on their options for the schools, and the funding from HIF there goes to secondary school places. So it will be a consultation on what those options will look like. Is that any questions on HIF there? Well, Madeleine?
I'm throwing you a bit quickly here, but when this whole programme was first talked about, there was going to be a HIF project board that would include membership from the town council, and that's not materialised, and it does rather feel being done to at the town council, particularly when you get presented with a fait accompli, which is what happened over the transport interchange. So I know you haven't been in charge of it, but I'm just flagging up that we were expecting a project board in the same way as the Garden Communities Project Board. The problem with the Garden Communities Project Board is that it's officer only, and I think there are lots of members around the table who would like to be able to have some input at some time to what's going on, because these are huge projects for Biggleswade. And we just wait to be told what's happening. So I'm just flagging that up with you so that you can feed it in wherever you need to feed it in, but it's not where you really want to be.
And so it's very much in my mind. You know, I hope you all know that I very much come from a partnership perspective on anything, and to me, for Central Bedfordshire not to be speaking to you all, it's like I'm going and digging up my neighbour's back garden, isn't it, without asking them about it. That's how I feel about it. For the way that I've been thinking about it, Madeline, and this has got to be worked through yet, but I'm thinking about it again from a place perspective, and not to have like a whole different set of boards and a whole different set of groups, but let's have a place, you know, a shared partnership place group where we can talk about all of this and see how it all fits together, and we're joined up with everything. Yeah. We can get some way towards that, can't we? I feel, you know, baby steps.
Very good. It sounds
baby steps. Yeah. So we've all got the right attitudes. We all want the same thing. We've just got to find that route to do it, and we will get there. Yeah.
Thanks, Ingrid. Has anybody else got anything they want to ask Ingrid in relation to what she's spoken about? Any other questions? Any thoughts? Seems good, Ingrid. I think we're
okay. Garden Communities, 2 seconds on that, is simply that we're waiting to hear from Homes England about additional funding, because we've asked for some more funding looking at sustainable transport corridors, and then further funding for support around design and planning. I've got a meeting on Monday with Homes England, and I'm going to push them a bit on there, but they did say it would be end of this month before they'd make that decision about funding. So see where we get to with that. And then I believe Caroline Danby is going to come to your next meeting to give a fuller update when we know where we are with funding on Garden Communities. On Ivel Valley, I've got some very detailed notes from one of my teams, so I'm not going to go through all of that, but happy to send that on to you to have a look at. But I think some of these things you'll know in the Phase 6B has been approved there for Stratton Industrial Park, looking at around 700 jobs, and it's 18 hectares. The local development order that we had there that was around the food sector, agri-food, and that's currently under review, and we're looking at how we'll take that forward, and probably putting that back to about autumn, because again it needs to be about surveys and consultation, and we want to do that effectively. Lidl, you probably, again, I'm thinking you know more about this than I do. Lidl was granted full consent in March. And they've said that the only delays really are just normal planning process delays, not so much about COVID. They're saying that they're still on track to open in autumn 21, and they're expecting to start construction works in December this year. They normally have a build time of 28 to 32 weeks. So that's where they are. Local plan, again, you probably know more about this than me, but that's been going through that examination in public. It's finished, and we're waiting to hear back from the examiner. And then the Central Bedfordshire Home Farm allocation, it's on course, it sounds like, but it looks like the inspector will come back to that in spring 21 about his thinking around that. And in terms of being closer to all of that, I have got some meetings coming up in terms of power, power capacity and usage, because one of the things that I want to influence, one of the things that Biggleswade is going to be in a prime position for is the offer that it has in terms of commercial land and power. There are going to be very few places in the UK that can compete with Biggleswade in terms of the offer now that it will have from a power capacity perspective, from its actual location and from the land availability it has. So to me, there's an opportunity there for us to think about the kind of industries we want coming into the area. What do we want in terms for our, career routes for our young people? We don't just want to sell the land off to the highest bidder. Where we have control on Central Bedfordshire land, we need to have a bit of a thoughtful process there on what's best for Biggleswade. And so I have asked the technical company who've been supporting us on the power project to start having a think about kind of the types of industries that would be interested in coming to an area where there's a big power capacity availability that would offer a good range of high quality jobs, and what might for them to have a bit of a think about what might be some things for our inward investment team to aim for on the kind of companies we might want to come to Biggleswade. And that's about it from me on where my thinking is at the moment.
Right. Madeline.
Ingrid, you're talking about Home Farm, and I was at the examination in public when Home Farm was discussed in a lot of detail. And you're talking about what sorts of businesses might come to Biggleswade. And the whole talk about Home Farm was really warehousing. And of course, the other site that's been put forward is New Spring Farm on the other side of the A1.
Yep.
And the inspector was very unhappy about the thought of warehousing and the approach to Biggleswade from the south on the A1 being just big warehousing either side of the road. Now, one of the things that was said at the EIP was that people wanted those units alongside the A1 so that they could have big name boards up so that everybody knew they were there. From my point of view, actually what we want is quite a wide tree belt either side of the A1 so that we can't see those huge warehouses. We've already got some of it where the Zeus warehouses are near the A1 South roundabout. There was a big discussion about what sort of employment we want in the area, and the fact that Stratton Business Park has gone very much to warehousing, whereas it was meant to be general employment land, and whether general employment land could be included in Home Farm. But I mean, we're also understanding now that there's a planning application coming in for effectively a motorway service station off the fourth arm of the A1 South roundabout. So events are overtaking us. So I'm a bit dubious about all of this and what's going on. But certainly the inspector, both inspectors were not very keen on this concept of this corridor of warehouses as you come into Biggleswade. And it's certainly not something I'd like to see. It's not, oh, welcome to Biggleswade and we're just big sheds and lots of lorry movements. So I think there's an awful lot to talk about there.
There is. Yeah, and it is. So I have started firing some shots out around all of that to say there's more to think about here than just a quick and easy return on money. So there's a project group that I'm going to on Monday that's run by the R Assets team that's about this whole Home Farm and Chase Farm. And this goes over to Arlesey. So there are two bits of land there. So I've started trying to influence from that direction, and then I'm also going to the Infrastructure and Delivery Board, the Central Bedfordshire one that's run by Henry Cleary. I'm going to that in February to talk again about power and to try and start some of this conversation and to engage with the developers there for phase 6B to say again, no, they want a quick return on their money, but there's such an opportunity here now. They're going to, it's like the world is their oyster on who they could attract to that if they put their minds to it. because it will be such a unique offer for Biggleswade, and we want to make the most of it, don't we? So I'm going to do my best to influence that. The owned CBC land, I'm thinking surely between us all, with our ward members, with our new leader, with the thinking that's going on in central Bedfordshire, we will be able to influence that. And then of course we've got our sustainability team and Steve Watkins personally, who dig holes and plant 1 million trees. So surely there's opportunity for that around Biggleswade as well.
Well, I think one of the questions at the EIP was about the viability of Home Farm, because the council had promised all sorts of things in that EIP, 2 bridle bridges, one across the A1, one across at the level crossing that's just been closed by Network Rail for safety reasons on the side of London. Lots of other infrastructure with lighting and footpaths and all sorts of things. So there's a big question about viability. I'll shut up now. Sorry, Chairman.
Hazel.
Ingrid, you mentioned about trying to ensure that it's not a question of having it warehousing and people getting a quick return on their money, and you're looking to make sure that viable companies are included in these plans. Could I ask you, as an ex-governor, to find out or to try and sort out some companies that will take on apprenticeships or training people? I'm not only talking about engineering apprenticeships, accounts and all the rest of it. They all come in as training and apprenticeships. And it would be really great to have an area that contains some of those, so that some of the students from this area can go on and complete their education and still stay locally without having to travel to Stevenage or Neath or Bedford. It would be great if we could find some companies that are sympathetic to training of the young people. I hope that's possible.
And so, funnily enough, I've just had that conversation with Sarah Ferguson this morning when we were talking about opportunity, how her team and my team can work together. And where we got into there was Section 106, young people, employment opportunities, and the Section 106 agreements that we'll make with these companies that do come to Biggleswade and locate here. For us, for both Sarah and myself, we were all about opportunities for young people. So that would be about working with schools, doing mentoring, offering work experience, taking apprentices, and doing some whole combination of kind of employability and education to have some joint offer there. So there's a lot of interest within CBC for that.
Right. And thank you. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got anything they would like to ask Ingrid in relation to anything? I'm sure you'll be keen on that, Ingrid. Yeah.
I think the key thing moving forward is for you to see me as your conduit. So to think about things you want to ask me and let me know, a couple of weeks before the latest, the next meeting, if not, just communicate with me as and when. But certainly I will try and give you like a fuller picture like this from now on.
Perfect. That's really good. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming to the meeting. Much appreciated. So I think then what we'll do now, if everyone's okay with, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you for coming, Ingrid. Community grants, and that's Sarah.
Yeah, just forgive me. I wondered if Paul Middleton had messaged me earlier saying could he move higher up the agenda, because I think he's got childcare.
It's okay, Sarah. That's been resolved.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, so it's only a very quick item. I'm sure members will have noticed the news coverage recently with Biggleswade United Football Club being awarded one of the community asset grants. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So that was one of our bigger grants, and that's really good news. So subject to budget confirmations, we would hope to run another community asset grant scheme next year, April onwards, and also a second or third round of the ward councillor grant scheme, but obviously subject to budget decisions in February. And that was all it was really, but just a very quick update. we have done an annual report on both schemes, and I think the information is on our website. So if I email the link over, perhaps that can go out with the minutes, and you can review what's been funded so far. That was it.
Thank you, Sarah. Anybody got any questions for Sarah in relation to that? Ingrid.
So Sarah,
yes, Ingrid.
As Councillor Tracy Stock, can I ask you, is there any opportunity in the grant schemes you have for something around a community transport project? Because we were having a bit of a think, some of the ward members and I, about how bus services in Biggleswade, and you know all the problems with that, with rural areas and bus services. So my head went to community transport projects where they've worked in rural areas, and I was wondering if you've got any ideas or thoughts around that or experience.
Well, obviously I'd be delighted to talk to you further about your ideas, Ingrid. But also just to mention, I mean, Biggleswade is lucky to be able to access the wind farm grant scheme, where there are, you know, reasonable amounts of money available, and which has supported some of the community transport schemes in the past. So yeah, I'd be more than happy to have a conversation about that.
Awesome.
Okay. Anyone else? I noticed, Madeline, you're smiling. I'm curious to know. No, I'm not curious to know why. But what we'll do now, then, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, if I may, which is highways updates. Paul.
Afternoon, all. Firstly, I'd just like to clarify a point from the previous meeting, and I know this will be keen for Councillor Whitaker, because there's been some dialogue over the last week or two. When just to put some clarity around how the annual plan is produced for highways works. Fundamentally, so we're in a period now where we're just drawing together all the relevant commercial and contractual information to generate the annual plan, excuse me, for financial year 21-22. When we look at information to generate that plan is around about sort of April to June time in the year that precedes it, to give us time to validate those sites, either propose them for the annual plan or defer them to a later time. So appreciate when I sent out, or at the previous meeting, when I made a comment of saying, inform us if there's any concerns, that was for the following annual plan because of the time of when it was. So that was, I think October was the previous meeting. So it's just to put some context around the timescales that we work to generate the annual plan. By the time sort of September, October, November comes, that's when we're literally pulling the bones of the annual plan together, not when we're validating sites that have been sort of suggested. Does that sort of make any, is that some clarity around that? Appreciate it's a bit convoluted.
Hayley, did you want to come back on that?
Absolutely. So obviously, Paul, you have my list that residents have generated of about 58 sites, which covered both wards. But I think it's useful for everybody to recognise that essentially in a couple of months' time is when we need to be engaging with you for the annual plan for next year, essentially. So we need to be thinking now if there are more major strategic plans that we want to come into force next year. And I think we all should all be thinking about that now.
Very, very much so. And if anybody wants to speak to me as a group or individually as to how that process works, how we do the assessment process, we're just in the process as well of revising all of our highways policies and strategies and our operational documents because they need a review and update. So if anybody would like to understand how that process is done and a bit of an understanding of what generally is that would get promoted into the plan or what wouldn't, then feel free to contact me on that. I'm more than willing to either run through it or even take a COVID-safe walk around the town. I am very local to the town. I can see the swimming pool from here. So if anybody does want to have a stroll around, then just drop me a line and we'd be more than willing to do that.
Well, I think that would be really useful. So just to jump in there, useful to know clearly, Haley, that the 50 odd items, it'd be useful, I guess, for us all to have a bit of an understanding of what they are, and then collectively how they fit into the that plan, and maybe as a group we prioritize those or help support some of the prioritizing of it. So it's not a case of everything obviously can be done, but perhaps we could work together to decide which ones as a group, either as a joint committee or as ward councillors, which ones we feel are the highest priorities, and then work with you on what's deliverable from your point of view.
Yeah, because obviously we are trying to get to a position where we can objectively assess every footpath, every road, every street light across the whole of CBC. So as Biggleswade, you'll have your areas of concern, and we need to assess those and understand where they fit in the context of CBC as a whole. But as I say, I'm more than willing to liaise with you guys on that front.
Thanks, Paul.
So I'll move on just to give you a rundown of where we are currently at this point in time. So we've got Cedar Avenue footways work going on. That is due to be completed by the 24th of February. The Potton Road Edward Peak footpaths they're being upgraded. They're due to be completed by the 31st of March. There was a few issues around there. The only bit that won't be completed where we would like to finish off what would be the green wheel is where one of the footpaths, as you enter Edward Peak and turn left, heading back towards Baden Powell Way, unfortunately, we've still got the development going on there, so it hits a close boarded fence. So that's the only bit that's outstanding, and as soon as the development is finished there, then we'll get that fully opened up. But obviously, the alternative route at the moment is around Potton Road up to the King's Reach pub and then join Baden Powell Way there. So that's due to be completed by the end of financial year. The high street works that I'm sure many of you have got stuck in those three-way traffic lights at the moment. They are going on very well despite the weather. They are due to be completed by the 15th of March. Again, apologies, I just need to double check on these dates, because the dates that we give you are when all of the works are completed and then all of the relevant documentation is supplied to us from the contractor. So the actual site works may finish prior to that, but this is the latest date that the scheme in a sense is completed with all of the as-built records and the health and safety file. Again, just don't be perturbed if you think, oh, that's a long way away. Yep, Hazel?
I just wanted to ask, the roadworks that's going on at the moment at the junction of London Road and round by the library and all that, and they said they're going to take a few weeks. What actually is it? I couldn't find out, I couldn't see which power people it is or whether it's maintenance. All I can see is vans and people working, but I don't know what it's about and what they're doing.
That is the junction reconfiguration that went through Traffic Management Committee. My understanding of that is, because Ringway Jacobs are doing it, so it's not power related. It's I think it's the High Street scheme, which is where there's a zebra crossing going in.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and then we've also got the Bridleway 7273, which is out by Sunderland Farm. That's ongoing, and that's due to be completed by the 31st of the 3rd, or I'm not sure if it's started fully yet, but it's due to be completed by the 31st of March. There's a few issues around that, but that's still to be delivered by the end of the financial year. The London Road active lifestyle scheme that went in, there's still some signage to go up. That we've had a delay with our contractor Ringway Jacobs on that, but they've now fully been ordered and they'll be installed imminently once the signs come into the depot. With regards to the London Road scheme, Steve Lakin informs me that there is being drawn up a more permanent solution to that, because this was obviously the initial solution. So there is a more formal one being drawn up, of which when that's been drawn and designed, that will come out to consultation. So unlike this initial one, which was, this is a sort of a trial to see how it goes, the permanent one will be very much a consultation before it gets laid down on the ground. Because because I appreciate we've had various comments and feedback for the current one, so it will be consulted on. So don't be perturbed that we're going to put something down without consultation. With regards to the Potton Road traffic lights crossing, just let me bring up the relevant email. So again, I've spoken to Steve Laking with regards to this. Due to the original design and the location, it wasn't feasible to put that in. So Steve informed me they were going to go out to design to get it redesigned. My understanding is also going to be redesigned as a zebra crossing, a different location, but that's to be confirmed. It was going to be designed by an external design house. However, I believe that's now being brought back in-house for Ringway Jacobs to do it. I don't have a timeline on that, and I apologise for that because I know a number of you have had a keen interest and have tried to get responses on that. The current temporary lights are not in use because schools are running at a lower attendance, so therefore they're not working. Steve Lakin and their team have moved to a different directorate, but he's still taking responsibility of that scheme. So as I say, I spoke to him earlier in advance of this meeting. So if there is any direct questions with regards to that, because I appreciate that it has been going on for a considerable amount of time, please let me know. But I do know that it is moving forward, and it hasn't just got stuck. It sort of was a pause button for a while, and it is now progressing. I don't know if we want to take some questions before I carry on the rest of the Mark.
Yeah, I'm going to predict what the first question is, but I'm going to leave it to Madeline to ask it, and then I'll see whether it matches what I thought it was going to be.
All I was going to ask was, why is it now a zebra crossing? What are the issues with the original design? And is the new design, going to include issues to stop parents waiting for children right on the junction of Potton Road and Stratton Way, and also Potton Road and Nursery Close? Because I'm fed up with receiving emails from residents of Nursery Close about this. So, you know, what were the issues, and is this new design going to include parents waiting at junctions, particularly in the afternoon?
Okay, I can only answer part of that question, if that's right, Madeline. And the first part of why it's not going to be where it was originally located is because when it was designed, the house there on the school side of the road then put in a planning application to, I presume, either be extended or do some work. So suddenly there was a drop crossing as part of that, a vehicle crossover, that was right where the crossing was going to be. And planning didn't work with highways to get that resolved. So in theory, when the design was done, it was perfectly acceptable for there. Then in hindsight, once this house had been developed, actually it wasn't suitable. So in answer to your first part of the question, that's the reason why that location. With regards to it potentially changing to a zebra, personally, I'm not sure why that change has been made, but I can ask the question to Steve Lakin and the team as to why there is a change, and also waiting points around closes, etc. That's okay.
Yep.
You're on mute, Madeline. Sorry.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Anybody else before we? Okay. Well, I'm going to ask the question, Paul, in relation to the temporary crossing being switched off. I appreciate the fact that there are not as many students attending Edward Peak, but it seems a bit, from my point of view, seems a bit bizarre that we switch them off because there are some children attending the school. So how can we justify not having them in place if there are some children? If there are none, I could completely understand it, but some seems ludicrous to me. So that's not a question, I guess it's a statement.
And that's fair, Mark. I must admit, when Steve informed me that today, I was a little bit surprised that was taken. So I'll take that away and ask the question as to why, to give you some feedback on that.
it needs to be, I think. I think the other thing around the design, the zebra crossing element, as a ward councillor and also a member of this committee, I think the committee would want to understand what the design of that's going to look like. Clearly, it'll come out to sort of consultation, but in terms of where it's going to be, what it's going to look like, the junction, how the junction changes are going to be configured, I think it's important that we have input into that. I mean, from my point of view, with the previous location where it's planned, seemed to not be the obvious location in terms of where we, the crossing used to, the lollipop lady or whatever the equivalent was used to be, but I appreciate that things have to be designed around traffic safety, etc. But we very much need to know what it's going to look like and when.
My gut feel, and this is just personal gut feel, is that a zebra crossing is potentially easier to fit into a space than a full control crossing because of the infrastructure that's needed and probably desire lines as well. But that's just my gut feel. So as I say, I'll take that away and try and give you an update well in advance of the next meeting or in between them.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else got any questions, comments? Steve?
This isn't aimed at you, Paul, because you've not been involved in it, but the communication on this crossing has been nothing short of appalling. I think certain officers need to be reminded of their constitutional obligation to reply to emails in a timely manner, because it's certainly not happening. And I've made that perfectly clear to the chief executive, who wasn't particularly interested. But the new head of highways seems a little bit more open and responsive. Now, I complained. I did a freedom of information request to find out how much the temporary crossing had cost us. It's £5,000, which, you know, in the grand scheme of things, isn't a lot of money. But it's £5,000 we've wasted because we've had no update on the permanent installation of the crossing. But bringing us on to Mark's point, actually £5,000 to ensure that any number of children, whether it's 1, 2 or 5, can cross safely is surely a good use of taxpayers' money. So I'd ask that politely, more polite than I've been recently, perhaps you could feedback that the level of communication on this has been absolutely diabolical. And should they wish to remove and replace the temporary crossing, shall I say willy-nilly, it would be most courteous to let ward members and indeed the town council know. Now, I'd like to repeat, because I've sounded very snotty then, that is absolutely not aimed at you, and you know that you're my favourite highways officer because you answer emails and we talk regularly, but that doesn't apply to most of the others. And it staggers me that Steve Lakin seems able to respond and talk to his own colleagues, but seems too aloof and haughty to reply to ward members. So perhaps you could pass that on in a very polite way. Thank you.
Will do, Steve.
Good luck with that, Paul.
No worries. Just some other points as well. I don't know if some of you have noticed, we now have what's called the Wenner's Law Walk, which is a circular walk that we've developed in conjunction with the Green Sand Country, what would they be, group, I suppose. That is a circular walk that goes from Biggleswade through Sutton to Potton and back to Biggleswade. So that has been signed now, and we've got some further work to do about some information boards about it. We've garnished some history of the route as to what people are likely to see. But the principle of that, just to put some context, is that project has come about with regards to, we're doing 3 of them over CBC, 1 in Biggleswade, Sutton, Potton, 1 in Ampthill Flitwick area and 1 in Leighton Buzzard area. And it's to encourage new people that live on new developments to explore the open countryside that we have in and around those new developments. So they're all geared around the touch points on that. So if anybody would like a little bit more information or know the route, then again, contact myself or Councillor Watkins will be more than willing to assist you on that because he's been involved. But I've walked it. It's quite a pleasant route. Goes up from picks up sort of the green wheel at where that said crossing point is at the moment, up through the RSPB, out towards Potton behind the transmitter, and then back behind John O'Gaunt Golf Course, and then through Sutton, and then back through sort of Sunderland Farm. So it's a very pleasant circular walk. It's about 8 miles long. It's now all of the main highway signs are up. I think there's just a few waymark signs that just need to be changed over. But again, it's something we're quite keen. Unfortunately, the weather at the moment is not great for us, and then obviously with COVID, we were looking to do a summer launch with the Greentown Country annual festival, but we're sort of waiting to see how that all transpires with COVID. Which brings me on to the next point. For those of you that are maybe not aware, Orchard Close, the entrance or the exit, the fence, the gate into the Weatherly Centre is going to be reopened, because you're probably aware that the Weatherly Centre is going to be used for a COVID vaccine site. So there has been ongoing discussions about getting that gate open. So I think there is some comms going out to the residents there, because it was shut for the request of residents through parking. So that will be reopened, but it will only be reopened as part of the COVID vaccine side of the Weatherly Centre. Traffic signals, I gave an update. Oh, sorry, Hayley.
Thank you, Paul. I've had a lot of correspondence from residents of Orchard Close with concerns around the gate being opened or closed, or what it was going to be, but particularly about the increase in traffic in terms of people parking outside their homes. It's going to be a lot of people accessing that site, and a lot of people, walking up and down, which is fine. But I think it's more that people might not actually use the car park and might actually start parking outside their homes, and they're really very, very concerned. What can we do to try and address their concerns? Because I know originally the plan was to not use Orchard Close and was to just use Eagle Farm Road. Obviously that's changed. Madam's waving her hand.
Yeah, could I come in there? Because I've been corresponding with the head teacher at Stratton School, although I'm no longer a governor there, and also a member of the neighbourhood planning group who happens to be a trustee at the Weatherly Centre. And the Weatherly Centre trustees have agreed with the school that there will be an in-out circuit, so people will be encouraged to come in along Eagle Farm Road and to leave the site via Orchard Close, which should save some of the traffic problems and means that people will get to the Weatherly car park, or indeed the school car park, which isn't fully used at the moment because the school's not open. There may well be issues when schools start to reopen, because there are obviously safety issues, but the plan at the moment is it's in Eagle Farm Road and out in Orchard Close. But if I can just say, Paul, as some of the background to this, I've had a lot of dealings with residents in Orchard Close who don't like the community centre being there. But I have to say, the school opened in September 1950. The Weatherly Centre was built in the 1970s. Orchard Close was built some time after that. When I was a pupil at Stratton, Orchard Close was actually the driveway to the school. So those people who bought those houses in Orchard Close knew they were buying houses near a community centre. And yet we get this constant, almost every time there's any kind of change at the school, we get this constant carping about using Orchard Close. It is a highway access to the school. And whether the gate is open or not, I understand now, is down to the Weatherly Centre, except at certain times because of the school needing access. So I'm sorry to go on about that, but there's a lot of history to that. And I could go much further, but I've actually sat in meetings with Central Bed's legal people over this and know exactly what the situation is. So I'll stop there. But at the moment, there shouldn't be such an issue for Orchard Close residents, because it will be out only if people adhere to the one-way system.
Thank you, Hayley. Go back. Yeah. Up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So thank you for that, Madeline. It's really useful. I think what we need to be very clear on is the messaging on this, because there's been all sorts of things coming out from all different parties about actually what the entrance is going to be, what the exit is going to be, whether you should be approaching. I've seen messages saying the approach is via Orchard Close, whereas actually I'm being told from Central Beds, from Celia, actually, no, we don't want to use Orchard Close at all. We want to use Eagle Farm Road. And I think there's a real mix-up about which access we're going to be using. And we're going to have such a large volume of residents, not just local residents, but people from out of the area trying to access the Weatherly Centre. The signage around there needs to be vastly improved. I know somebody who's actually working at that site and went there this morning to start their work, couldn't find it, and drove past it about 3 times. So we need to improve the signage around there, because we're going to have people from out area coming there. And we need to make sure that that current idea of going in through Eagle Farm and out through Orchard Close actually is really well communicated to those that are coming to the site. Because at the moment, I know there's some issues with communications around vaccines at the moment. I'm very well aware of those issues. But I do think that we have a duty to actually make sure that when we do start using that centre, which I believe is going to be today, that actually we do so in a way that is open and transparent, and that the message is 100% clear.
So just to end that point, is that we as Highways are not obviously the lead on that COVID setup. However, we will, as and when requested and required, facilitate that support. So if there is an issue with signage, which by the sounds of it there could potentially be, and that then if we as Highways are required to support them, we will. Hence, like I don't know how we ended up getting the contact right for the Weatherly Centre to get the gate open, but we sort of facilitated getting it open. But yeah, as and when we're required to, we'll add our input. Two more things and then I can leave to it. Traffic signals, I was just coming on to, we were hoping to have the contract signed in place to get those delivered, of which there's some within Biggleswade. There has been a bit of a legacy issue with regards to a contract that we have with Luton Borough Council that needed to be bottomed out. There was a meeting last week and Luton Borough Council with their supplier Denique are just pulling together the programme of works. So as soon as I have that programme, I will cascade those dates around to you as a group, so you're aware of when they're going to be done. I was hoping to have that for this meeting, but unfortunately it hasn't come through as yet. So we'll do that. Lastly, I do a lot of work with Stephen Mooring in his new role of sustainability, because Highways has quite a big chance to input on the new sustainability plan. We've had a couple of meetings recently this week. One of them was with regards to e-scooters and how e-scooters could be utilised within CBC and potential. And the other one was about green infrastructure. So there are, and during both of those meetings that we had with suppliers, Biggleswade always came up as actually there's potential to trial certain aspects of those in and around Biggleswade. So there's nothing concrete. It was just an initial discussion. And I know some members here are probably already closely aligned with Councillor Dixon on the sustainability plan, but just to give you some feedback, that the potential in Biggleswade is great for some of these initiatives to be looked at, especially with likes of e-scooters, where you've got something like I call it a town square in King's Reach, and then corridors to the station, to the retail park and to the town centre as well, which Biggleswade in a sense in that element is sort of, so to speak, ready-made for a potential trial of that. But we're working with companies and legislative means to look at those as well, just to put that in some context. But that's pretty much all from a Highways perspective, Mark.
Thanks, Paul. Any more questions for Paul? Hayley.
I'm not really for Paul. It might even be for Steve or for the town council. I think we have a real lack of electric charging points, publicly available electric charging points around the town. Are there any plans to actually install those within, for example, the town centre car parks, which I know are run by the town council?
Shall I answer that, Mark? We constantly talk about electric charging points, but of course, putting them in our car parks means an investment by the town council, quite a large investment. At the moment, our largest car park, we're renegotiating the lease, so we're not going to commit to any sort of further investment in that car park until we know that we've got a lease on it. So we're not unaware of the possibilities, but there's no definite plans yet.
And is there any interaction's the wrong word, but given your sustainability hat, Steve, but also given the move across central beds to move more towards sustainability, I suppose, is there something that can be done between the two councils, is I suppose what I'm asking, to try and help the town council come forward?
Sorry to interrupt. So obviously what started as a fairly small portfolio for Councillor Dixon has grown exponentially, so I'm helping with that, and I've only had one discussion with him so far. I've got another tomorrow, but yes, we have discussed electric charging points, and obviously everything we do we'd like to do in partnership, but there'd certainly be investment from our side for the right opportunity once the town council secure the long-term future of certain car parks. But we won't go in head first. We've still got to measure demand, and the reality is at the moment that it's quite a long journey to encourage more and more people to convert to that type of technology. But yes, it's something we're looking at.
Can I just add a bit onto that as well, if you don't mind, Steve? Stephen Mooring and myself again have had numerous discussions on EV charging, because we get requests in, not so much from car park related like your query there, Hayley, but more so for people with on-street parking requesting charging points. Now, the putting it in car parks is relatively straightforward, as long as you in a sense future-proof what you're putting in there, that it's going to last. On-street parking is a whole different ballgame, because a bit like with disabled parking bays, they shouldn't be for an individual, they should be for a group that need to access that. So it's no divine right that parking space outside that dwelling on public highway is for that individual. So we are trying to do a piece of work with a company that looks at the demographics of CBC, and they've got some clever algorithms of how they can understand where demand would likely to be and how to influence the take up on electric vehicles. Now, we're trying to do that across the whole of CBC in conjunction with the work that Ingrid's doing and her team, with Councillor Watkins and the bigger sustainability plan, but also from a highways perspective of utilising the existing highway. So as you can imagine, when you bring all of those together, because they all have different stages, different competing needs, it's quite a challenge to do that. And I think the risk is that we drop some in and actually they're not fit for purpose, or they're not in the right place, or it creates more problems than it's worth. So that is a real challenge. But we are, and I think with Stephen being in place of head of sustainability, that's the driver to get the right people talking, which we already are, but with a real focus to deliver that and engage with the town council to work like with our own car parks, the town council car parks alike. So I think that's moving at quite a pace. I'm ever so sorry, Mark, I haven't scrolled up on my email, and I've got just a few more things just to say very quickly. So upcoming for next year, we've got 2 footway resurfacing schemes in Biggleswade, which are Broadmead and Nursery Close, 2 carriageway resurfacing schemes, which are Swanbourne and Drove Road. And then lastly, I promise this is the last one, our new online portal, which is based by Fix My Street, goes live next week. I've been duly informed. Some of the CBC members may have already experienced it. I, for one, have been on the working group and experienced it. It is a marked improvement on our current Report It portal. But as and when it does go live, then feel free that if you have any queries, comments on that, then do feed them back. Jack Bowers will be is the lead on that. But all being well, excuse me, that goes live next week.
Great, thanks.
And that is it, Mark.
No problem. I see no other hands. Ingrid, you wanted to speak? Go ahead.
So also earlier this morning, I was talking to UK Power Networks about this electrical vehicle charging as well. And they were telling me about a company that I'm going to follow up on called GridServe, who are putting in large-scale batteries, downloading from the grid at optimal times, setting that power up and then selling it on to electrical vehicle users. But the beauty of the offer that they've got is that basically it'll be like a petrol filling station, that you'll be able to go in, charge your car up in the space of 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and go off again. And so I wanted to have a conversation with them to see where they're thinking about in this world and where they're trying their business model out. Apparently a very successful model, 2 brothers that have set it up and making money hand over fist. So something there to look at. And then the other issue as well, the station, the new petrol station that's been talked about on the bottom of the A1 there, as part of the CBC commercial land, or along with the CBC commercial land. That's the relocation of the existing petrol station on the A1, and when that moves, if that happens, if it all goes through planning, that will also include a big part of this big electrical vehicle charging unit as well. So I think the way the future is going is it won't be that you need to plug your car in at your own home. You'll be able to go effectively to like a petrol station and fill up in 15 minutes and off you go again. So I think the whole technology around that is changing, but that is something that I was going to go away and look at for you guys as well, in the whole Biggleswade context in the A1, and you know what you've got there and how that might fit in.
Okay,
that was it.
Much appreciated. Okay, I think we've concluded the highways element, and Paul, thank you very much for your input there, much appreciated. It's always welcome to stay. Next item on the agenda then is the neighbourhood plan update, Madeline.
Okay, I'll give an update now, but I think Peter Tarrant will be updating it in the future. He's not able to join us this afternoon, but he'll be updating on the neighbourhood plan to future meetings. Looking at the minutes, timescales have slipped dramatically, and that's really because of lack of capacity at the town council. But our new clerk, Peter Tarrant, has set up an officer project board to progress the plan. And we have appointed a project manager who works with Urban Vision, and they're the consultants who are actually, Dave Chetwin from Urban Vision is actually going to write the planning policies. Our project manager is working through Urban Vision, but he has worked in the past with both Bedford Borough Council and Central Bedfordshire Council, and he actually does know Tom Price, who is the Central Bedfordshire liaison planner for neighbourhood plans. So we think we can now progress this much faster. We've just received a further government grant to help towards the funding of the neighbourhood plan. We're still developing policies to go forward to Town Council for approval. And we've also got a lot of supporting evidence to gather. Some of that supporting evidence will be evidence to do with Biggleswade that's been produced by Central Bedfordshire planners for the local plan. Some of it will be things like the Town Centre Master Plan from 2011 and the Town Centre Plan that was done by the BRCC resident group that they put together. That there's much in there that's still relevant. But we've got lots of other evidence to gather, things like maps of the floodplains and maps of, we've now got 3 more scheduled monuments in Biggleswade that have just been announced. So we have to plan those and see what impact that has. And of course, we didn't have the informal engagement that we'd hoped to have in autumn 2020. And we very much need to have another informal engagement with the public. And this is long before we begin the formal process where we have a formal public consultation. We're probably now looking at a referendum in May 2022 rather than the hoped for October 2021. And finally, as I say, the project team is headed by Peter Tarrant, and he will now give further updates to future joint committee meetings. So happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you. Do you have any questions? That makes it easier for you, Madeline. I see no questions. So members, thank you very much.
Thank you.
On that basis, then, Sarah, we will move on to the work plan, please.
Yes, thank you. So this is something we put in place about 18 months ago to try and give some forward planning capacity to the committee. But I think in light of Ingrid's input and new role, then perhaps the chair, the vice chair, myself and Ingrid might want to have a discussion about how we manage the forward plan going forward, if that's okay. But the next meeting is April the 22nd.
Correct. So I think that's it. I mean, I think this meeting has been, the format of the meetings work well, and if there's an addition, it's almost as if Ingrid, if this works for you, a regular update at joint committee certainly works for us. So I guess we're probably going to be looking for an update of schools for the future at the next meeting as well. So we're almost you can see the agenda almost lining itself up anyway. But I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. So if we take it away and come back with what the work plan looks like, with some additional bits and pieces, as and members feel free to send emails to others, to the chair, the vice chair, or Sarah Hughes, and we can certainly build it into the agenda if that's deemed appropriate. Hayley.
Thank you, Mark. I'm conscious, that the town council have done a lot of work on emergency planning, but I'm also conscious that right now last night we had a lot of issues around potential flooding that was going to happen, and at the moment I think we are very not quite ad hoc, but the town council and CBC response and Blevett response, that it's not quite a seamless plan by any stretch of the imagination. And I think because we are next to the river, because we've got roads like Hitchin Street that do tend to have burst water mains and other emergencies, we do tend to have quite a few local issues, and it can be quite difficult, I think, sometimes to get things to happen. So last night we needed leafleting, and it was scrabbling around trying to find 3 people who could leaflet Biggleswade, for example. And I feel as though perhaps we could have something going forward, maybe if Mark Conway can come and speak, or part of the community safety team, so that we can try and understand how we can work better between the town council, the community response teams and CBC to make it better for the town. Because I think at the moment it's a very fragile system we have working, that if we had a real problem, we'd struggle.
I think you're right, Hayley. The town council have done a lot of work on the emergency planning, and I think it's acknowledged that the previous plan that was in place, I guess, wasn't fit for purpose, but it certainly is a more comprehensive plan that's been worked on. I think, and the town clerk has communicated with Mark Conway, and the general feedback has been that Mark's been pleased with the plan. There are obviously some elements of how that's implemented in the town council, but I think it's a good thing, a good idea to maybe invite Mark to the meeting so that we can get a link up and see how we can improve things. Any other, Madeline, you wanted to comment?
Well, I was just going to say, yes, invite Mark to the meeting to talk about emergency planning, but make sure that Peter is available as well, because he's been closely involved. And I just wanted to say that there's a lot of talk about river flooding. We have a floodplain and it works. And there's only been once in the last quite a number of years that we've been anywhere close to flooding due to river flooding. We've had blocked gullies and all that sort of thing, but it's only in Kingfisher Close when the water came across the field that's there and got as far as people's front doors and garage doors. That was not good. But on the upside of the town council's part in all this, some of us have been to see our new depot at lunchtime, and it's going to be far easier to be ready. We talked about flood preparedness when we were visiting the depot at lunchtime, and we can be in a much better situation than we have been in the past, because we haven't had the facilities to store and set up our equipment in the way that we need to. So it's not all bad, but the river flooding side of it, I've lived by the river for 32 years. I think I have some idea about what happens with the river flooding, and I certainly was not worried over Christmas, and I wasn't worried last Friday when the river broke its banks, because the river did it flooded the fields, or some of the field between the river and the A1, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. So I just wanted to add that. But I think if Mark Conway's coming, Peter Tarrant, we need to make sure he's available as well.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think that it's the point around the whole emergency plan, isn't it, and how it works. But yeah, absolutely. Let's Sarah, if we can, see whether Mark is able to attend and tie the two things together. Beyond that, as we've said, if Madeline, if you and I and Sarah and Ingrid talk together, we'll build something else into the next agenda. Other than that, then members, thank you very much. Unless anybody's got anything else to add, we will conclude this meeting. Oh, before we go, then, Councillor Knight, you were did you want to
very briefly? Sorry, I forgot to mention this in a more timely manner. Could the slides from the School for the Future presentation by Sarah Ferguson be shared with the group, please?
Sarah Hughes.
Yeah, certainly. I'll go back to Sarah. Yep, no problem.
Appreciated.
Sarah and Sarah.
Sarah. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much then. Good afternoon. Cheers, bye now.
Thanks, Mark.